Indigenous Women Talking, the work of Indigenous feminisms in the world. So in this paper, Val was inspired by the extraordinary writing of Miriam Toews, especially by her fearless book, Women Talking, which she describes as an imagined response to violent crimes perpetuated against Mennonite women in Bolivia, where between 2005 and 2009, more than 130 Mennonite women were drugged and raped by men in the community. Rather than taking the route of the more standard, straight-up academic paper to address the many issues, concerns, and experiences of Indigenous women and allies, she steps here into the realm of the possible. So this chapter is then structured as a series of conversations, vignettes that delve into and hopefully allow a deeper and more creative rummaging into the hard questions being asked or not across the country. So these vignettes then are her imagined responses in a hoped for dialogue which will come soon. Raven is perched at the top of Pacalls, the little mountain in Victoria. It is dawn. The sun is still muffled through the dense fog. The world is a soft palette of grays and whites, and the rain now a fine mist. Raven thinks about her most recent reading, Women Talking by Miriam Toews. So many thoughts about the importance of conversations, the many forms of power, intergenerational Indigenous feminisms, the forms of expression and translation between and across legal worlds, and of course, about the continuing invisibility of Indigenous male privileges. Then there is the rich range of disagreements and conflict between Indigenous women. So necessary and healthy, she thinks. Chewy and delicious, too. Well, most of it anyway. Might she take up the pen? She is a trickster, after all, able to transcend her current form, which, quite frankly, is somewhat limiting to her writing goals. How about Indigenous Handmaid's Tales? Raven chuckles to herself. But then she thinks that, sadly, there are already many versions and aspects of Indigenous Handmaid's Tales being experienced by Indigenous women and girls across Great Turtle Island and beyond, too. She consoles herself. Still, there is always the hope of the Testament. Maybe that Margaret Atwood is a trickster, too. She sure writes like one, and such a wicked sense of humor, scrumptious. Raven continues musing about her options. I could be a literary trickster. Look at what Eden Robinson does. She is such a strong Indigenous literary trickster. And Raven thinks some more about what she could do with Indigenous women talking. Yes, different circumstances and starting places. She wants to shake this up, though. What would the conversations look like in a world where Indigenous feminisms are on the loose, where Indigenous feminisms are the norm rather than an afterthought? But that is changing. Raven is nodding to herself, pleased with her own cleverness, as only a trickster can be.
Lucy and Clara are closing in on 80 now. Both have deep laugh lines and soft, wrinkled skin. Lucy has assembled her long gray hair into a neat bun that sits atop her head. Clara appears to have made no effort, and her white hair goes in all directions. Both are comfortably dressed in different colored tunic dresses with leggings, and they sport the latest jazzy orthopedic shoes. Bright rainbow grannies. As is their daily habit, they are sitting in lounge chairs on Clara's deck. Today, they are watching a raven perched nearby in a large spruce tree. The raven is watching them back. You know something, says Clara. That raven looks like she is listening.
Lucy squints at the raven through her dark horn-rimmed glasses. You think? Why would she be interested in our little chinwags? It's not as if we are among the younger activists and leaders that matter anymore. We just drink tea while the world goes on. What a nosy thing. She waves her hand somewhat dismissively at the raven, but something stops her. She turns back to look at the raven again. You know, I think you're right. Well, then let's give her something to listen to.
Like what? Clara smiles. We used to be a lot more exciting. Remember when I used to have a motorcycle? I never used to worry about my joints or limbs. Not like now.
Yeah, you sure thought you were hot stuff, chuckles Lucy.
I was hot stuff. And we used to party like nobody's business. I sure miss the dancing. I just wouldn't dance on the tables now because I don't want to break a hip. Clara is shaking her wild hair and snapping her fingers to an old rock and roll tune that's playing in her head.
Lucy contemplates her friend for a moment. I wonder if we would be treated so wonderfully as elders if them young'uns really knew about how nuts we used to be. Well, you really, not me. Well, okay, maybe we're both crazy.
Clara is suddenly still. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like such a caricature. One-dimensional, as if we were born old tea-drinking grannies. As if we hadn't been on the front lines of so many direct political actions over the years. I loved the blockades up north when we used to camp out. And I used to be so sure that the revolution was right around the corner. Ha! Them young'uns, they wouldn't have been able to keep up. Clara is smiling at visions of the distant past.
But don't all young people think their elders in previous generations are simple? We did. I mean, we thought we were the only ones that were really alive, while previous generations were dull and probably never had any excitement in their lives. It's hard to put my finger on it. Sometimes worry that my grandchildren and great-grandchildren see me just like that, just dull. Feels so weird. Lucy is frowning.
Maybe it's us. Clara starts talking directly to the raven. Maybe we have lost the pulse of the world. Maybe it's us who don't take the young ones seriously, as if they have nothing new to teach us.
Well, aren't you just a little ray of sunshine? I'm usually the optimist here. Lucy takes another sip of tea. Oh, I wish I could smoke.
Me too. I loved smoking. Clara mimes holding a cigarette, taking a drag. Not that it solved any problems, of course.
Geezer talk is really boring, Clara. Lucy is growing impatient. She glances up at the raven. Yeah, she looks bored too.
Ignoring Lucy, Clara continues. Once when I was teaching, I tried an experiment to get at some of the various unstated age-isms and stereotypical elderism. So there I was, scheduled to guest lecture on Indigenous law in another faculty. I walked into the classroom wearing a long wraparound skirt and granny blouse over my regular business clothes. I wore a little kerchief over my hair too. Then after a bit, and while still talking about Indigenous law, I untied the skirt and took off the blouse and the kerchief, and I set these aside. I didn't say anything about the clothing while I was doing this. I continued to talk about Indigenous law, and after a while, I put on a beaded and fringed motorcycle jacket. It was really kick-ass. After another bit, I took off the motorcycle gear and I put on a suit jacket. All the while, I didn't acknowledge what I was doing. I just kept talking about Indigenous law. At the end of the talk, I asked the students how they heard me and whether they might have had different responses to what I said, depending on what I was wearing. How does Indigenous law sound, whether it comes from a speaker wearing a suit jacket, a badass motorcycle gear, or a granny outfit? Clara laughs and she throws her arms out wide. I thought I was really clever, figuring out a way to encourage some critical questions and some deeper reflections through performance. But there was no response, not even any questions about why I had bothered with all this extra activity. I didn't know what to think. I was more than a little deflated. Clara sighs, obviously still disappointed at the memory.
Smiling and trying not to laugh, Lucy asks, maybe they were uncomfortable with what they thought was some kind of crazy old woman burlesque?
What? Jesus, Lucy, sputters Clara, and she snaps her eyes at the raven, who was bobbing up and down and making funny noises that might be laughter.
Oh, just relax. It is fun. Well, maybe the students just didn't have any different responses to your outfits, like they didn't see any difference in the performances, Lucy offers, trying to calm her friend. She reaches out to pat Clara's shoulder.
But Clara remains irate. Her face is red and she continues huffily. That can't be it. People have always treated us differently depending on whether they think we are law professors or spiritual folk or hunters or academics or some various version of elders. What I hate are the assumptions that we can only be one thing at a time. Like we can't be a spiritual law professor, or we can't be a critical feminist elder, or a hunter academic.
Geez, take it easy. Calm. Lucy is concerned about her friend's blood pressure. It is frustrating, and I know it is exactly what leads us to being conflated to the simple, lacking any depth or complexity. And it is true that people often talk down to me when they don't know that I used to be a law professor. They assume that I'm always agreeable and that I'll support whatever they're doing and that I'm only interested in the spiritual and not the hard issues, and that I don't think critically or independently. And I do hate the dearie thing. Oh, is it rude to slap someone when they call me dear?
The raven appears to be nodding along with Clara and Lucy. She cocks her head, listening for more. Ready for a margarita, Lucy?
Is it 3 o'clock already? Oh, yes, I am. This tea is cold.
The raven flies off in search of other conversations.